When Social Security, as an example, was created in 1935, life expectancy was like 62, something like that. You fast forward to 85, and now life expectancy is like in your early 80s, like late 70s. So you have companies thinking, we can't afford these pensions anymore. Why don't we just create this pathway for people to save their own money, maybe as incentive, or at least have some skin in the game, we'll match it. But that's where things really change, really where I think our industry starts. Because again, going back to your grandparents probably didn't have mutual funds or stocks or anything that people that we assist have today. Their company was taking care of their retirement problems. Their government was taking care of their retirement problems. But now it's 85 and companies are saying, you know what, you've got to have a hand in this too. The 401k is born, and that's where all of a sudden people have to manage all of this stuff on your own. I hope you're ready for the next episode. It's Saturday State of Mind with Mike and Jess Panico. I'm Mike.
I'm Jess.
And Jess, I thought that today we could talk a little bit about some of the history of financial planning insofar as it kind of affects what Arcadia is up to and how we help clients.
Dude, history and financial planning are two of my favorite subjects.
Now, half of anybody watching this video probably just immediately turned it off. History lessons, but
it's going to be fun. Like Drunk History. Have you know that show?
Well, this is water, just to be clear.
Okay, fine.
At least that's what we're going to go with.
But I do think that was like very instrumental when we first started the show. We kept saying, can we do this like Drunk History? And they reminded us, probably not.
It helps to loosen things up a little bit.
Yeah, but no. Swear, teetotaling right now.
Okay. I do think that people take for granted a little bit like what financial planning has looked like over time. In fact, it's changed a lot, even like while we've been running a financial planning practice.
Sure.
So something I like to sometimes do when I meet people for the first time is like ask for them to consider, what do you think financial planning or retirement planning looked like in 1776?
Do you also do this on the other end of the spectrum where you ask them, what do you think financial planning is going to look like in like 2035?
Oh, like what is retirement planning going to look like in the year 3000?
Yeah, in the future.
Yeah.
You'll be in your flying car going somewhere.
Flying cars. They just always seem to be a couple years away.
Okay, well, maybe that's the next episode as we talk about the future. The future. But let's go back to the past a little bit.
So, of course, if you go back to, say, the country's founding, which is just like any old day, it doesn't really matter how far back you go. You go back far enough, retirement planning wasn't really a thing. Like most people didn't live that long. I once read, I think it's still true, that out of all human beings that have ever lived, half never even made it past the age of 15.
15?
Yeah. I mean, historically speaking, living is hard. There'd be like a lack of food.
Living is hard.
People from the other tribe coming over the hillside, like, ruining your village. I mean, getting to advanced age historically has been really, really difficult.
Remember like people getting married like at like 14 or having children starting and they're like, I have 14 kids until the last one killed me.
You had to start a family at 14 because you had like 8 years left.
Oh my gosh, that's depressing. And I think also you had to have 10 kids because odds are some of them weren't making it past 15.
And you probably needed like extra hands around the farm or whatever. Like oftentimes like mom sometimes would die in childbirth or like dad didn't come back from the war. So you would need those kids. I mean, life has just changed a lot.
Sure.
Right. And kind of like a hallmark moment, I think, in like this story is that something changes around World War II. Antibiotics, cleaner like operating rooms, that sort of thing. People just start living longer.
The introduction of penicillin was definitely a game changer.
And people start getting older with more frequency. And so prior to, it's like if you actually made it to your 50s, 60s, and 70s, you probably like hung around the house like with your kids and like there'd be multiple generations in one house.
Right.
You were minding the fire, minding the grandkids, maybe feeding the pigs or something. And maybe in the absence of family, there was like a church or a monastery, or you hoped so. Right? Because otherwise it'd be really, really challenging to get on because there weren't any societal safety nets. There wasn't like 401k plans. Like these are all like in the last handful of decades, new developments.
You mentioned like all the family gathering around the fire. The house that we've lived in for about 12 years now was built in 1790, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really neat that you can see they've obviously added on because we would live in a 2-room house they had from then. But there's that old like beehive oven and the hearth that we had where they had like all the family, all the generations were there. Right. And the houses were small, in part that, well, one, no one was building like 4,000 square feet houses back in the day, but also that was like the main heating source. It would heat the entire house. So, and you had multiple generations that would be there. So it's kind of crazy how, like, you think of those old days and how that's like transformed to where we are now. And with financial planning, it's really no different.
So the way I understand it, actually, you're going to go a little bit back before World War II, the Industrial Revolution. People are leaving the farm. They're going to the cities. How do you keep good workers around? My understanding is the pension enters the fray. And, you say to people, hey, if you stick it out with my company after you retire, I'll continue to pay you even once you're done working, right? And that's a pretty good offer. I think the first pension in this country gets introduced like in the 1890s, something like that,
wow, okay,
which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I think it was like American Express actually that did this.
Right.
Later, everyone's like, why don't I have a pension too? And that's where the governmental solution comes in. In short, 1935, Social Security. So if you think about it, like just think of your grandparents. They were probably retiring in what year? Like the 70s, the 80s, something like that?
Yeah, I mean, the 80s, my grandparents were 60. So yeah, somewhere in the 80s.
So when they go to retire, like what does their retirement planning look like? Usually mom hadn't worked because generationally speaking, you go back to like, say, your grandparents' generation. Most women were homemakers. Sometimes they were teachers, but they weren't out in the workforce the same way that they are now.
Sure.
Men also had a bit of a different experience. Like dad would have worked for like the same union or plant or business, usually his whole career. So typically there was a pension in the mix. They both have access to Social Security. And so long as those two income sources meet or exceed their budgetary needs, like voila, if they want, they can retire.
Can I just, one point of clarification when we said mom didn't work? I'd just like to throw a little something out there
for my personal safety.
For your personal safety, that like, especially in those days, like mom's job was probably like running after like 5, 6 children.
It is a full-time job for sure.
No doubt is it.
Yep.
But obviously it's not income producing. We're talking about
there was no savings attached to it.
Correct.
It was strictly in support of like, husband's efforts going out and working and that sort of thing.
Okay.
People certainly didn't have it easy, for big stretches of time. And things changed though, somewhere around, I think it's 1985. Some geek somewhere out there notices like this little flaw in the tax code that says, well, you can put money aside from your paycheck and have it grow, on a like tax advantage basis. And the code that he discovers that lays this all out is like subsection 401k. And companies latch onto this thing because people continue to live longer. Pensions, as a result, are getting more expensive. So corporate America says, okay, you know what? Instead of us being on the hook for paying for the entirety of your retirement, because here's what's interesting, right? When Social Security, as an example, was created in 1935, life expectancy was like 62, something like that. You fast forward to 85, and now life expectancy is like in your early 80s, like late 70s, at worst. So you have companies thinking, we can't afford these pensions anymore. Why don't we just create this pathway for people to save their own money, maybe as incentive, or at least have some skin in the game? We'll match it. But that's where things really change, really where I think our industry starts. Because again, going back to your grandparents, your grandparents probably didn't have mutual funds or stocks or anything that people that we assist have today.
Sure.
Their company was taking care of their retirement problems. Their government was taking care of their retirement problems. But now, it's 85 and companies are saying, you know what? You've got to have a hand in this too. The 401k is born, and that's where all of a sudden people have to manage all of this stuff on their own.
What I always think is interesting is that statistic that I know is that when Social Security was introduced, what was like the average life expectancy and when did you get to collect?
So life expectancy in 1935 was about 62.
Yeah.
But the original law was you could begin collecting Social Security at age 65.
So they expected you to be dead 3 years before you could collect.
Well, so not a lot of people know this, but the American people didn't actually want Social Security, like by and large. I mean, some people supported it, obviously, but they looked at it as just an additional tax. Sure. So the Congress knew at that time, well, especially, post World War II, a lot of men and boys, they didn't come home from the war. So Americans really did value life insurance because it did bail out a lot of households where, those husbands didn't come home, right? So it replaced the income that was lost as a result of them losing their lives. So the way that they pitched Social Security was really to think of it less as like an additional tax and more so like insurance, like old age insurance, if you will. In fact, there's like a clue that there's some truth to that, because when you look at your pay stub, it doesn't say Social Security tax. There's that acronym FICA, and that stands for Federal Insurance Contributions Act. So the way that they sold
it's
this,
insurance,
right?
It's not a tax.
So
taxes are bad. Insurance is good.
well, I'm trying to say at one level, you could say, well, look what Congress did. They were no different then than they are now. They created this thing that you wouldn't benefit until you were 65, but life expectancy was 62. But it was also put forward as insurance. Like, most people don't die young, right? Most people don't crash their cars. Most people weren't expected to make it to 65 and beyond. So it really just was for those outlier people.
Just in case you need something.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So maybe they're not as rat as I thought I was alluding to.
Yeah. And that's of course, a generous interpretation to some extent. But here we are, the pension has effectively gone away. I mean, there's no new pensions getting created. I've always said to people, like, yours is like the last generation that will probably see pensions in earnest, right? Because they're just very expensive, certainly for private companies. So we have the 401k, and it's like a shift, because before, like, your grandparents were their Social Security and the pension, it's effectively like, well, it's somebody else's problem to make retirement happen. But with the 401k, it's now your problem. Right. You have to decide how much money you put in. You have to decide what risk that you're going to take. You're going to have to decide when you're going to start taking distributions, how you coordinate it with Social Security. So it's easy to see from this then perspective that somewhere in the late 80s, early 90s, people were like, I'm a school teacher. I'm a bus driver, right? I'm a mechanic. I don't know how to make these decisions. Can somebody help?
I don't want to manage my own money. Like, what if I mess up? This isn't my day to day. It's not what I do. I'm not an expert in this. I'm not pulling my own teeth, right? I'm going to the dentist for that. Like, so who's helping me with this?
And hence financial advisory is more or less born. There have been stockbrokers and similar before that. But in terms of putting together an actual retirement plan with all of its individual components, like, that wasn't really a thing. And it's crazy to say this until like something like 30, maybe 40 years ago at the very most.
That's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
That's a good story.
It is pretty cool.
I like that.
But it allows us to advance things a little bit further, because for the most part, when you look at retirement planning, it's not just one thing.
Right.
There's all sorts of things that you have to prepare for in order to say, okay, I'm ready for the next 20, 30 years, like this next chapter of my life. You have to replace your paycheck. So you need an income plan. You want to reduce the amount of taxes that gets applied against that income and against the other savings that you have. So you need a tax plan. By the way, that other savings, there needs to be an investment strategy for that, because you want that money to continue to grow. What if there's a health event along the way? So maybe we need additional insurance or something that's going to supplement your Medicare. And then finally, it's like, where does all this money go when I'm gone? And so that invites the lawyers with their estate planning, your wills and your trusts and that sort of thing.
So it's like, no doubt that things have gotten way more complicated.
Yeah.
No wonder why there's a whole industry born out of people just helping you navigate this.
Well, not just one industry, there's many.
Sure.
Because everything I just said there is effectively like its own silo.
Right.
So
the insurance guy, the investment guy, the tax lady, the estate planning lady.
Right. So the average person, when they're navigating all of this, has maybe an investment person. Maybe they're doing some of this on their own, but they might have a tax preparer. They might have an attorney that's helping them draft all their estate planning documents. They might have somebody that's helping them with like certain types of insurance, like life and disability, but then somebody else that's helping them with home and auto. There might be a third person that's helping them with like Medicare supplement and similar. So when you start counting on all your like fingers and toes, how many professionals you might need to package all this together, sometimes you might need 5 or more professionals. And that's kind of a lot.
I might have to take off a shoe to start counting at this point.
Yeah.
And not to mention have to like coordinate so many different appointments and driving around and Christmas cards.
Well, it gets daunting, like at inflection points. So sometimes financial planning doesn't matter until it's the only thing that matters.
Sure.
Like, I think for a lot of people, their financial plan is on autopilot, or it's just not something they think about a lot until something big changes. You've lost a job. There's a death in the family. You got to move across the country. All of a sudden you're scrambling. I got to move this money. I got to make these big decisions. I got to take a big withdrawal. But now if you have 5 different professionals right? I've got to talk to my accountant. I got to talk to my investment person. I got to talk to my attorney. You might not be able to do that as quickly as you'd like.
Sure.
You might be getting conflicting or confusing advice. They're not all on the same page. So it can get really stressful really fast.
Yeah, no doubt. And, there are so many of those disparate professionals, like they really do impact and work with each other. I mean, you're taking a big withdrawal, like for your financial advisor, what tax consequences does that have? So then now, not only do you have to consider both, but like get those people talking to one another or writing down all the information that you barely understand and calling the other professional and rattling that off. But like, well, this guy said that. It's like, no, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And it's like, oh my gosh, where do I go? Who do I trust?
And Arcadia, even for a good majority of our existence, was just like one card in the Rolodex for a lot of people who would be going through one of these inflection points. So, someone's like going through a job change or whatever, they'd contact us, but then they'd have to have a separate conversation with their accountant or whatever. And at some point in the journey, we start to say to people, well, it's not right that you have to navigate all this on your own. You know what? I'll contact your attorney for you. I'll contact your accountant for you. We'll see if we can get them on the same page,
Sure.
like run ideas past each other. But as frustrating as it can be for just say an individual to coordinate that, it wasn't any easier or better for us to do it.
Right.
Because to some extent, there's professional courtesy.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes, these other professionals would contact us back and do it quickly and do it in the right same spirit, right? Trying to help people and make sure that everything was coordinated. But then there'd be times where you couldn't connect with these people. The timing wasn't working. Someone's on vacation. It's tax season. So we would run into a lot of frustrations too, where we're trying to do things comprehensively, but we weren't able to do it because we were running up against like, say, professionals that weren't like-minded or weren't available, or sometimes there was like ego and all sorts of other wild things that would be involved just that would get in the way.
Makes me think of, I don't know if you ever like call the pharmacy, but when you do, like I call CVS and there's like this prompt that takes you through like 20 different things. But the very first thing they say, if you're calling from a doctor's office, press 1. It's kind of like, it's express lane. If you hit that, they're gonna, oh, it's a doctor calling. I should answer that right away. Whereas, you're like just a patient, like calling in just a patient, you have to like listen through the 18 other prompts to click to get where you're going. So wouldn't that be great if all these like different services are coordinated? It'd be like, hey, if you're another professional calling to get business done for our clients, like patch them through right away. But that doesn't exist.
No. And I'm a little bit embarrassed to admit, I don't think it was until COVID we were on some sort of coaching call and, there was people describing all these new services that were coming out because of the pandemic. A lot of them were online only. And there was some couple out from the Midwest that had like like a bookkeeping service, something like that?
Yeah, they did a couple of different positions. It was like bookkeeping, virtual assistant,
but it was
web
remote,
design.
right?
It was all remote
Instead of having like a remote person, you could outsource your bookkeeping needs as a business to this couple. And they're thinking,
yeah, so you didn't have to bring somebody on board if you didn't need them 40 hours a week and have all the payroll expenditures and things like that.
So I believe their story was they built this big business really fast in the middle of the pandemic. They sell it. They probably become like multi-millionaires overnight. So they described, well, all of a sudden, our financial planning needs really rapidly involved. We have all this money, all these investment decisions to make, all these tax consequences. So they found something that I didn't even know really was a thing called the family office. Mm-hmm. And you can usually find these in, downtown cities. Like they're pretty exclusive and rare because they cater to just small families and usually wealthy families. Because if you're going to provide coordinated, intimate service, generally it's going to require that you only work with a small handful of people.
Right. I mean, you think of how many relationships you have in your life. Like how many like friends can you manage to have a very intimate connection with?
Like I know a lot of people like Vanguard. Vanguard offers excellent mutual funds. They're very cheap, but they have millions of customers. Sure. So it's not like Cheers or something like where everybody knows your name when you call Vanguard. It's an 800 number. It's a call center. So it's a bit of an alienating experience. Right. But suppose you're a very wealthy family and you want to make sure that you have the best possible investments, that the tax guy is working in cahoots with your investment planner, that the estate planning attorney is involved in all this and updating things. And what really struck me in their conversation is like, they said when we go to meet with our financial planner, our kids come along because we wanted our kids who were one day going to inherit some of this money to have good behavior around money, to have good values around money. And this, like, it just really struck me that you can do like just go beyond portfolio management or basic strategies, the X's and O's of finance, tax savings and strategies. You can actually work at a really personal, intimate level and help families that are not only going through, say, like big or massive change, but think about intergenerational issues and how like money's going to change a family or what direction it goes in the future. It just really struck me like a bolt of lightning.
Yeah, and it's really cool, if we see, folks come in their 60s, well, their children might be like 30s, 40s, something like that. So not, kids, not children, but like their children. And it's always great to, bring them in, if that's what mom and dad want to do. They want to make them aware of their legacy that they're leaving and the goals that they have for this money. But even people that are like in their 30s, bringing your kids along that might actually be kids, like teenagers, like 20s. I don't know, call me cynical, but I just do not think our like American education system does a great job teaching kids about money, finance, like open like a 401k. You get a free match at work when you start your first job when you're 22. Like you better sign up for that. That's free money. Invest now, not later. So it's such a cool concept to be able to share that with your children.
Yeah, we do the opposite. Like you remember the first like mail that you got in the mailbox when you got to college, right? You get your own little PO box.
Yeah.
And you remember what some of like the first mail you would get?
Besides the flyers to the pizza place?
Right.
Was that notice from Sally Mae?
or like credit card offers.
Oh yeah, those are big too. It's like if I sign up, they're going to give me $500.
Yeah.
Like,
So
I'm going to get 10 of these.
It's not uncommon for some of the first moves you make as a young adult to be really, really bad financial moves. Like you're going into tons of debt, and then you have credit cards. So I mean, that's a totally different topic.
You probably saw less of that because, you went to business school and you would hope that there was a lot of financially savvy people there. I went to school where it's more medical professionals. And I remember, I didn't even know a ton at that age too, but my roommate, I'm like 18 and, she's like, I'm like, how are you buying all this stuff? Like, you don't even have a job. She goes, I got a credit card. And I'm like, do I have to pay that? She's like, not now. I was like, okay, enjoy ruining your credit forever.
We got off that call and I said, Jess, why don't we do the same thing for our clients, offer them this environment where we can offer to have their kids be involved, but also have ancillary professionals involved in the process. And we made a decision, I think, within a matter of weeks, if not a month or two, to bring in tax professionals, to bring in legal professionals to the extent that it was possible, such that you're going through a big change in life. You're changing jobs. There's a death in the family. You're deciding to retire. Instead of you having to go all around town, well, I'm going to go have one meeting with my accountant, a separate meeting with my insurance person, and a third meeting with my investment person, and a fourth meeting with the attorney. I mean, it's just exhausting to even explain all of this.
Sure.
How about instead you can just come to one place where all these people work in close coordination with each other? In fact, like effectively have the family office experience, but have it offered to ordinary people. So right now, traditionally, to get that kind of service, you need tens of millions of dollars. But what we've discovered is if you get the right like-minded people together, you can offer this to just, regular everyday people.
And I can't say it was that easy. It wasn't a slam dunk because, we had a few different partners that weren't in-house, but people would refer business to, or our clients just seemed to use this like accountant or attorney or whatever it was. And, we'd talk to like him or her and be like, man, this person is just really on a different page than me. And they don't work for me. Like I can't control that, but like the goals and offering just like a better service, a better experience for people. That's not always that's important to us, but maybe not important to them. So it was something we really couldn't control very much and thought, if we had a family office, we could be making more of an impact.
And we've recently started calling it a complete financial planning process because there's a lot of talk about, we do comprehensive planning here.
Or holistic.
Comprehensive with a lot of companies and firms, and I'm not even casting any stones here, but it's generally pretty narrow in scope, but it's using a big word. I mean, when you say comprehensive, I think, oh, you must be covering everything. But
I think of like car collision comprehensive
coverage.
Comprehensive coverage. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't even know what that covers, but it seems like a lot.
You used to get in a lot of car wrecks, Jess.
That's
back in the day.
You want to put up our tally sheet? Can we pull up a tally sheet right here? No. Okay.
It's mostly parking tickets, actually, if I'm being fair.
Yeah.
You got.
I did get the boot once.
Okay. But anyway, the comprehensive thing, effectively, for most companies, it means, well, we do investments and insurance. Maybe we do something in the way of tax planning or strategy.
Stocks and bonds.
But there's going to be gaps. Well, we don't do the will. We don't do the trust. We don't do Medicaid supplement or advisory. We don't talk about Social Security. That's not a thing. So what a lot of those firms have to do is that they have to have referral relationships. Here's some business cards of some folks around town who can help fill in the gaps. And we're like, that's not comprehensive.
Right.
So to us, when we say a complete financial planning process, other than banking, because Arcadia, we can't help you with checking or savings. We don't give out loans, but just about any other retirement planning decision that you have to make, if your dollars and your cents touch it, if it's a tax planning thing, if it's about investments, if it's about Medicare, if it's about Social Security, if it's about making a pension decision, we have somebody here. And in often cases, these are people with years and years of experience that can consult with you such that, and I love describing it to people so they can imagine it, when you're going through a big inflection in life, you can sit down with your accountant, your attorney, your financial advisor, anybody that we need, all in the same place, all at the same time. Oftentimes, before the meeting even happens, these people have already coordinated, consulted with each other, come up with a joint game plan. And so then when it's presented to you, everybody is on the same page and pointed in the right direction.
And obviously that makes a ton of sense, like tactically, like in building a complete plan, what does that look like from like finance, tax, legacy, all that. So yes, tactically that makes 100% sense. But more so than that, like, what are you trying to accomplish? I think that's what brings us back kind of to this mission statement we have here. We know everyone is on board with the same mission. Yeah. And our mission doesn't say to get you the highest rate of return or to make sure you save the most in taxes, or to like file a will effectively. It says that we're going to challenge you to fearlessly live like every day is Saturday. So knowing, yes, absolutely, we got the complete plan put together, but all of us, all your professionals are working together to challenge you to go out there and live the life you want to. It's not just all about the dollars and cents. It's bigger than that.
Absolutely. And I think in future conversations, we can talk about how that sausage is made, what it takes to coordinate all those professionals, and what the planning process looks like.
I don't think I want to know how the sausage is made, but that's okay.
Well, we're going to talk about it nonetheless. Okay. So I'd say join us for the next episode, Saturday State of Mind. We're going to continue that conversation.
See you then.